Upcoming episodes on the Flying Monkey podcast. Country music artist Grant Malloy Smith. 3-time Grammy Award winner Ricky Kej. Actor-musician, the one and only Chris Mulkey. Father's rights advocate Robert Garza. And new episodes of Parent Stories. Go to flyingmonkeypodcast.com and select your favorite social media site to join us. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Rumble. And don't forget to check out our sponsors, Open Darkness and Stop the Abuse. You can find more information at www.hopeanddarkness.info, a common sense solution to parental alienation. Let us help you get your kids back. And www.stoptheabuse.info. It's time for change. Together, we can stop the abuse. You're watching the Flying Monkey Podcast. All right, folks. Well, welcome back to the Flying Monkey Podcast. And today we have a very special and talented musician and a friend of mine who I've known for going almost 10 years now. He's a 3-time Grammy Award winning artist. He's a #1 Billboard charting artist. He's performed in over 30 countries around the world. He was GQ Man of the Year. And he's done 24 studio albums. He's recorded over 3,500 commercials, 8 major motion pictures. And one of the coolest things of all that, I think personally, is that he's a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador. So welcome to the show, Ricky Kej. How you doing?
Thank you, Tom. Wonderful to be with you, and great to be here. Great to be speaking with you.
Yeah, well, last time we saw each other in person was, I think, 2015 at the Grammys in Los Angeles. And that was a very, very special moment. And I got to meet you and hang out with you and Walter Kellerman. And you guys had just done an album. What was that? Winds of Samara?
Winds of Samsara, correct.
Oh, Samsara, forgive me. Yeah. And that was your first Grammy, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So why don't we just talk a little bit about that album and what it was about and what inspired you to do it and all that?
No, for sure. And, right up until 2013, I was doing a whole lot of commercials for television and radio, and that was basically my bread and butter and what I used to do as a musician. But in parallel, I was also making albums, and I had done a whole lot of studio albums by then and worked with a few major labels like Universal, with other labels within the UMG brand, that is Vari Sarabande, Virgin Records, EMI, and, and moving around within those labels. And I think it was around 2013 where it sort of struck me that I, being a musician, am not harnessing the power of music the way that I want to. Because my entire childhood, I've always been two things. I've been a musician and I've been an environmentalist. And the environment has always been forefront in every single life decision that I've ever made. But my music was not reflecting it that much, even though some of my albums were reflecting it. And some of the music that I was creating was about environmental causes and celebrating nature. Not all of it was. I think it was around 2013 when I'd made a very strong decision that the only kind of music that I'm going to make is about, in my own small way and my own tiny capacity, making this world a better place. And then I stuck to my guns when it came to that, as they say. So the first album that I did in this newfound, pathway towards making music was Winds of Samsara. Now, I was a fan of Walter Kellerman's flute playing, and he was a fan of my compositions and my keyboard playing. And both of us met up and we were figuring out how do we work with each other, how do we collaborate. And it came about that, a huge coincidence came about that I had just finished making a piece of music on my father of the nation of India, that is Mahatma Gandhi. And he had finished making a piece of music on his father of the nation, that is Nelson Mandela. So we decided, okay, this is what we're going to make this album about, because Mahatma Gandhi spent his formative years in South Africa. So he had a lot of South Africanness in him. And Nelson Mandela was heavily inspired by the non-violence movement by Mahatma Gandhi. So he had a lot of Indianness in him. So we decided, at the cross-pollination of these two great gentlemen, we'll create an album. And he'll add the South Africanness to the album. I'll add the Indianness to the album. And we spent about 2.5 years and we made this album, Winds of Samsara. And as they say, there was no looking back after that. We created that album. It was surprisingly commercially successful, the album. And then it ended up winning us a whole lot of awards all over the world. And that culminated in us winning the Grammy Award.
That's fantastic. And that's amazing because yeah, two of the most important people in world history, Gandhi and Mandela. I mean, those guys were, they did a lot. They fought hard and they made a big difference. And so for you guys to do that, that's pretty awesome. I mean, that's amazing. And yeah, I mean, I listening to it, I love the music and the videos you did and everything. It turned out great. It was really good. Moving on to the next set of albums or album, I should say, you did want something that was really cool with one of my favorites as well, Stewart Copeland from the Police. You guys collaborated and did an album called Divine Tides. And that one, you guys won 2 Grammys for that, right? Tell me how you met with Stewart and that all started.
So with Stuart, that was a really fun collaboration. So after Winds of Samsara, I've always been wanting to make a follow-up to that album. But because of my relentless touring schedule over the next 7 years, it was impossible for me to sit down in a very focused manner and make an album. Of course, I made a few albums in between, but they were not sort of like my magnum opus albums or my epic albums. They were just albums of ideas and thoughts that I had at that particular point in time and put that onto tape in a very short duration. But there was an underlying current of making this album, which would be as successful and as widely listened to as, as Winds of Samsara. So there were thoughts and ideas that would come into my mind, and some of them I would record, some of them would just remain on my phone or would remain in my mind itself. But then in 2020, the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And all of us were locked away in our homes and our studios. And that presented in itself an opportunity to actually sit down in a focused manner and work on this follow-up album. And I've been a huge fan of Stewart Copeland my entire life. In fact, I grew up with posters of him on my walls and listening to his
And
music and listening to his very, very unique drum technique and all of that. And of course, a huge fan of the Police, huge fan of everything that he did with Peter Gabriel, with Stanley Clarke, all of those albums, and also
yeah.
his film soundtracks. He composed the music for Wall Street and Highlander, some of my favorite movies.
And a
So
lot of TV shows too. Yeah. People don't
a lot
realize
of TV shows and
how
video games.
genius he, yeah.
Exactly. Over 50 Hollywood movies and maybe about 30 or 40 television shows and whole lot of video games, including the Spyro series of video games and all of that stuff. So he's done a ton of work. And I was a fan of all of that. So then I reached out to him through a common friend. And there's this gentleman called Ralph Simon who used to head Capitol Records and used to head Blue Note, a very good friend of mine, sort of like a mentor to me. So I reached out to him and I told him that, Ralph, I would really like to work with Stewart on an album. And I've got these pieces of music that I've recorded, small 30-second clips. And if we can show this to him and see whether he's interested or not. Ralph is like, yeah, I know his manager really well and I know him. So let's reach out to him. So we reached out to him. And the initial idea was that, that Stewart would come on board as a sessions musician, just to play percussion and drums, because I had read an interview of Stewart somewhere that, he had collected all of these sort of so-called exotic and ethnic instruments from all over the world during
Oh
all of his
wow.
travels. And he had loads and loads of these instruments. And he would love playing with them, but he had never professionally recorded these instruments. So I thought, okay, here is an opportunity for us to get Stewart to not just play the actual drum kit, the rock drum kit that he's used to playing, but also to play all of these different instruments from around the world. So we reached out to Stewart. Stewart said that no, he does not do sessions recordings anymore. But he said that he likes the music a lot. So he told me over the phone that he likes the music a lot and he's good with co-writing the album with me if I was open to it. So I said,
Wow.
yeah, of course I'm open to it. That's first prize. That's a dream come true. So then we spent a year working on the album, him in Los Angeles, me in India. And the time difference, like how we are right now, the time difference is exactly, the opposite. Whatever's day over here is night over there right now for you. So I had to change my sleep timings to match his so that we could work together. And I could give him instantaneous feedback on things, and he could do the same and give me instantaneous feedback. And up until then, when I would work on my albums, I was fully in control of everything that I would do. That every single note that would go into the album, I was fully in control, and Every single recording, every single musician who would come on the album, I was fully in control. But over here, for the first time, I'm working with an absolute legend, somebody who is way above me, So so we had to have in my mind, I had to have a way to work with Stewart Copeland that would be respectful and at the same time would be a learning experience for me. So I decided that every time Stewart would ask me to do something, or if he would do something which I would feel is not going to work for the album, and I'm 100% certain that this is just not going to work, I would not voice my opinion. I would just go ahead and do it. And then I would wait for 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, if I still feel that way, that it's still not working, then I would voice my opinion. And I did that, and there were at least about 40 or 50 times where Stewart would do something or would ask me to do something on the album where I was 100% certain that it's not going to work. I would not voice my opinion. I would go ahead and do it. And at the end of 2 weeks, I would realize that what he said was correct. And this happened every single one of the times, every single time that he asked me to change something. This is what happened, where I realized that I was just uh, uh, falling into this trap of falling in love with every single thing that I would do. And I was not having a different perspective, but time gives you that perspective. And I realized that, so for me, it was a huge learning experience working with him, the greatest masterclass I could ever imagine.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you make a good point because I mean, I record my stuff too, and I remember there was a certain point where they brought a producer in for the first time ever, and I'm used like okay, I know I can trust in myself, and I know I can trust in my writing, and the song's going to turn out good. It's going to be radio ready. It's commercial. But then this guy would come in and say, "No, can you do it in this key? Change that. Don't play that." He's like, "I needed something like a drum part, just something crazy and stupid and simple. Do whatever." And I'm like, "What are you doing? You're going to ruin it." But no, and then you sit on it and you absorb it and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." And you don't realize. So yeah, it just shows too and this applies to everything and everyone in life. I mean, there's always something more you can learn. There's always
Absolutely.
more you can grow and things and different ideas that help and make things even better. So that's a great story. I mean, that's cool. So literally like 40 times you were like, "Whoa, dude, I don't know about this."
It was exactly like that. It was exactly like that. But I would be like, that this time it's not going to work. At the end of 2 weeks, I'm definitely going to voice my opinion. But the thing is that, you have to hold on to, your thoughts and, and be patient about it. And then you realize that your perspective itself changes.
Oh yeah.
So that's what happened with me. And then, of course, later on, the album released and the album was hugely successful. And again, we won awards all over the world. And that culminated with
Yeah.
us getting nominated for our first Grammy. And I remember that really well because up until then, I had not even met Stuart in person, even though we had become such good personal friends, where we knew everything about each other and we would talk to each other almost every day, but we had never met each other in person. And that was the pandemic at the end of the day. So we were supposed to meet at the Grammys itself in Las Vegas. That year, the Grammys happened in Las Vegas. But then Stuart told me that no, he's got this concert in Nashville, which is a week before the Grammys. So he said, "Why don't you fly into Nashville and let's hang out?" So I said, "All right." So
Cool.
I went to Nashville, went to his concert. It was an amazing concert. And then for the first time, we hugged each other and met each other in person. It was a very emotional moment for me.
Oh, I
And
bet.
then we spent time at the Grammys, and then we ended up being called out and going up on stage and receiving the Grammy. So that was pretty amazing.
That's got to be an amazing feeling. That only happens to a very rare few. That's awesome. How did you like Nashville? Was that the first time you were over there?
And I've been to Nashville a bunch of times and I've
Okay.
collaborated with lots of musicians in Nashville. I love Nashville. I think
I do too.
it's a beautiful, beautiful city. And Nashville is the only city in the world where you have guitars being advertised in the airport. So
Yeah,
so that shows what kind of a city it is. And whether it is a law firm or whether it is a real estate firm, all these major brands which are Nashville oriented and Nashville born brands, all of them have got some sort of a musical name, a
that's
name
right.
which is somewhere in the literature of music. So I love that city. I think it's a beautiful city. The people are amazing. The studios are great. The musicians are
Yeah, they
great.
are.
The live venues are fantastic. Everything is great about that city.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Nashville's awesome. It's definitely a fun place to go and visit. And if you get to record there and play music, that's just even a plus. I mean, that's something special in itself. So that's pretty cool. So God, there's so many different things I want to talk to you about, but I mean, we're limited on time too. So um I guess the other thing that I found that was really, really cool that you've just done recently, I believe it was recently, is that you ended up doing a rendition of the Indian national anthem. And it ended up winning a Guinness Book of World Records. And then I was reading about what you did with it. We had the London Philharmonic. You had 14,000 children singing in a choir. I mean, I mean, that's just that's I mean, how do you handle and how did you manage all that? And like, just tell us about, the whole process of that.
So that was quite a process. So the national anthem of India is a piece of music that brings the whole country together. Very
Hmm.
few people know this about India, that you drive about 150 or 200 kilometers in any direction, and you're going to find a completely new language, a completely new dialect, completely new written script, new culinary taste, new religion, new tradition. It's almost like two times the size of Europe squeezed into one country. Just
Wow.
like in Europe, you drive from country to country, from nation to nation, and you're going to find a completely different culture and a completely different completely different, yeah, language and things like that. It's the same in India, because India is also, it's pretty much a union of states, coming together as a country. So, but the one thing that binds the whole of India together is the national anthem. It's a zero controversy piece of music where you can be from any geographic location, any tradition, any religion in India. And the minute you listen to the first few notes of the anthem, you feel a sense of pride towards the country, and you feel that you're one, and everybody's harmoniously in one, as a nation. So the national anthem is something that is very dear to me, and I thought that, all right, I want to create the national anthem with the kind of respect that it probably deserves. So that
Yeah.
is why I came about these various layers of recording it, starting with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra in London. So I recorded them at Abbey Road Studios, a 100-piece orchestra. And I remember that Abbey Road itself were telling me that, that it's been decades since they have recorded a 100-piece orchestra. So they've never recorded a 100-piece orchestra for over, I think, they said that at least that in their memory for the last 2 decades, they have not recorded a 100-piece orchestra.
Wow.
So it was pretty cool to bring in a 100-piece Royal Philharmonic Orchestra and me conducting them. Also, there was an added subtext over there, because the British, after having ruled us for 200 years, and and imprisoning us during those 200 years for even singing the national anthem, now we have
Really?
an Indian composer conducting 100 of their finest musicians performing the Indian national anthem. So
That
that was pretty
that's
cool.
yeah, that's awesome.
That is pretty cool. And then the second layer to it was the Indian classical musicians. So we got the top Indian classical musicians from the length and breadth of India, the most legendary musicians, the best, who are at the complete and absolute top of their game. We got them to play the solos on the Indian national anthem. And the third part was basically 14,000 tribal indigenous children. Now, these are children from, not just any children, but children from indigenous communities. So we partnered with an institution in India called as the Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences. They are an institute that at any given point of time, they feed, they clothe, they take care of, they board, they lodge, completely free of cost, 14,000 tribal and indigenous children from
Wow.
very backward communities. And, they give them a really great chance at life. So what we did is that we partnered with them, and I did a bunch of rehearsals with these 14,000 children. It was quite a logistical nightmare, as you may imagine, because nobody's done this
Yeah.
before. So what we had to do is that there were various things that we had to devise, because there was no past precedence. We had to create a stage which was in the shape of a cross, so that as many students could be as close to me as possible, and and I could hear as many students as possible. We had to create a complete recording studio in a stadium. So we had to use over 250 microphones and multiple audio consoles and multiple sound engineers, so that we could record all of them in the most
Yeah.
pristine way as possible. We also had multiple microphones on drones, so that we could get like a proper, an aerial sound of, aerial recording of what 14,000 children sound like. And we got the children to sing in 4-part harmonies. And that's what became the latest version of the national anthem, which has now become the definitive version of our national anthem.
Wow, that's amazing. That's and you even got them to do four-part harmonies too. So
Yeah.
that's a trick in itself. But 14,000, I can't imagine that. That's just incredible. Yeah. And then recording at Abbey Road Studios as well, all the famous, the Beatles and ELO and Jeff Lynne and all those guys, George Martin. Wow, that's awesome. So now, just for our audience, where is there a video online, or where could they find that? Because that's something I think everyone needs to hear for
Yes,
sure.
it is available online. So if you go to YouTube, you can look for Ricky Kej National Anthem.
Okay.
and it'll show up. There are two versions that will show up. One version will be just with the 100-piece Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, and the
Okay.
other version will be with all the elements that I mentioned, including the 14,000 kids.
You're an ambassador of goodwill for the United Nations. How did that come about, and what does that entail?
So, as I mentioned, I've always been an environmentalist my whole life. And starting about 2013, even before that, I was making a lot of music celebrating nature and also talking about issues and raising awareness on various problems that we face. But post 2013, pretty much all of my music has been about the environment and positive social impact around those areas. Now, the thing is that living in India, India is a part of the global south, that is the developing nations in this on this planet. The environment can never be taken in complete isolation, simply because in a country like in a country which is in the global south, a developing nation, there are only two kinds of problems. All problems that we face, whether social or environmental or whatever, can be classified under two major headings. One would be a problem of survival, and the second would be a problem of thriving. Now, when it comes to the developed nations like the United States of America, or Australia or Europe, what happens is that the problems of survival are sort of taken care of, more or less, because everybody can flick a switch and a light turns on, and you've got your basic necessities more or less for the entire nation. But when it comes to so basically, y'all can concentrate a lot more on the problems of thriving, which is what the environment and climate change is considered to be. Whereas when it comes to a nation like ours, before we get to problems of gigantic worldwide problems of global warming and climate change, and environmental issues like deforestation, we first have to ensure that every single human being has got a good standard of living. So if you go to a village which is steeped in complete poverty, and you give them these narratives that let's make a better world for our future generations, they're going to turn around and tell you that, what about our generation? You cannot skip our generation, because we do not have electricity, we do not have sanitation, we do not have basic housing, we do not have basic human rights. Uh, so that is why one has to first tackle social issues like these, like poverty, hunger, malnutrition, water, sanitation. And only if you tackle these problems, only then will people buy into problems of the environment, even though the environment is also actually a problem of survival. So that is the reason why I widened my scope to include a very holistic view towards problem solving when it comes to the environment. And I guess the United Nations recognized that. And it started off with me making music for them, for their various causes, and doing concerts for them all over the world. And then that built into me becoming their global goodwill ambassador. So,
Wow.
which is a role where I not only take part as a musician, but also as a diplomat with them. And, help them, I take part in negotiations, take part in policy framing, and also, also take part in the conferences and things like that. And try to figure out a very top bottom and a bottom up approach towards problem solving.
And that's really, really awesome. But like you said, it's so complicated, and you have to do first things first. Otherwise, you can't get to the final result.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And also, it's also depends upon the way you communicate.
true.
Because what I've realized is that when it comes to especially environmental issues, there are always two ways to communicate. One is through a lot of doom and gloom and a
Yeah.
post-apocalyptic world, and with a lot of shaming people into action, which I feel is effective in some ways, like, for example, to get governments to do whatever they need to do, but it does not have a long-term effect. So that is something that I called the Greta Thunberg approach, the Swedish child activist. Her approach is that, of trying to use doom and gloom and shaming people into action, which I do not discount, but I feel that it probably does not have a long-term effect. The second approach is what I would call the Sir David Attenborough approach. The naturalist from London, from the UK, where he basically makes these movies and he makes these beautiful series where he showcases what is beautiful in this world. And and we are absolutely inspired by the beauty of our world. And hopefully, through that beauty, we find it within ourselves to protect, to conserve, and to sustain our beautiful world. Because at the end of the day, they say that we as human beings, we only protect things that we love. And we only love things that we understand. And we only understand things that we are taught. So,
That's right.
so the only way for us to make this world a better place is to showcase what is beautiful in this world and mesmerize everybody in the beauty of this world. Through that, hope that everybody learns and finds it within themselves to coexist, not just within us human beings, but with all life.
Yeah, I love that idea. It's really cool that you're going to these places where they don't have much of anything and trying to motivate, and they're right too. I mean, what about us? What about, right now, right here? And that's where it's got to start. Is there anywhere somebody could go to learn or help or partake in kind of those endeavors, or is there a website or?
Yeah, so people could get onto my website, www.rickykej.com, RICKYKEJ.com. And there's a whole lot of information over there as to the kind of work that I do and the verticals that I do. Because, as I said, I've got a very holistic view towards, approaching my end goal of protecting nature and protecting the environment and conservation. So I work with children through UNICEF. I also work with the WHO on air pollution and on mitigating the effects of air pollution and also sound pollution, and also work with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in terms of the refugee crisis, and also with United Nations Environment in the obvious realm of protecting nature. So
Yeah.
these are the various things that I do. So anybody can go onto the website, check out what I do, and if and there are email IDs where they can get in touch with me, and I would love to engage. Lives.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, yeah. Coming back to your music right now, you signed with a new record company. I saw you did that, Universal. That's amazing. Congratulations on that. And then, so now, do you have a new album coming out?
Yeah, it's out. It's an album called Break of Dawn. So this album, for this particular album, uh, it's basically me returning back to my roots of creating music that is for mindfulness and for meditation, because there is this very important quote, which is from ancient Indian traditions of Buddhism and Hinduism, which says that that the impurities of the environment is a direct reflection of the impurities of the mind. And in order to purify the environment, one has to first purify our minds. This is something that I've really taken to heart, that with so much of mental wellness issues that we face in our world, especially today, and it's getting more and more worse. I believe that a holistic way, you keep using the word holistic, but in this particular case, it's absolutely true that a very holistic and a very long-term solution towards solving the environmental crisis and solving social issues is to ensure that we alleviate the mental state of our society. And I believe that if that happens, then all of these problems will be problems of the past, because whatever solutions we have right now are very palliative, are very symptomatic solutions. But taking care of our mental wellness, I believe, is going to the root cause of every problem. So it is based on this that I created this album. The album itself is based on something known as Indian rags. Every song is based on a different Indian rag. What is an Indian rag? It's basically a very well-defined scale in ancient Indian musical traditions. And each of these scales are proven to alleviate our mental state and make us happier and bring joy into our lives. So
Wow.
that's what I did. I composed this particular album and created it, and it was released as a joint release with Universal Music and with Verve Records in the United States. And both these record labels formed a label known as Vedam Records.
Well, I wish you luck with it. I think I'm hoping you get nominated again this year for the Grammys. And our time's up, so I just want to thank you so very much for taking the time. I know it's late for you, and talking with us and sharing your story. It's amazing, and good luck to you. And again, thank you. And I hope to see you in Los Angeles in February at the Grammys.
Thank you so much and hope to see you soon in person.
Okay, Ricky, you take care. Bless you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching the Flying Monkey podcast. Like, follow, and subscribe to our social media sites on Facebook, X, YouTube, Rumble, TikTok, and Truth Social. You can also go straight to our webpage at www.flyingmonkeypodcast.com.